Thank you, Mr. President. Given the Republican nominee's recent comments about the Khan family and his statement that if president, he would consider recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea, does it make you question his fitness to be president? And secondly, sir, on Libya, you've said in the past that the worst mistake of your presidency may have been your failure to plan for the aftermath of that 2011 NATO intervention in Libya. Do you see your new decision to bomb ISIS there as a direct result of that?
Yes. I think the Republican nominee is unfit to serve as president. I said so last week, and he keeps on proving it. The notion that he would attack a Gold Star family that had made such extraordinary sacrifices on behalf of our country. The fact that he doesn't appear to have basic knowledge around critical issues in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, means that he's woefully unprepared to do this job. And this is not just my opinion. I think what's been interesting is the repeated denunciations of his statements by leading Republicans, including the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader and prominent Republicans like John McCain. And the question I think that they have to ask themselves is, if you are repeatedly having to say in very strong terms that what he has said is unacceptable, why are you still endorsing him? What does this say about your party that this is your standard bearer? This isn't a situation where you have an episodic gaffe. This is daily and weekly, where they are distancing themselves from statements he's making. There has to be a point at which you say, this is not somebody I can support for President of the United States. Even if he purports to be a member of my party. And the fact that that has not yet happened makes some of these denunciations ring hollow. I don't doubt their sincerity. I don't doubt that they were outraged about some of the statements that Mr. Trump and his supporters made about the Khan family. But there has to come a point at which you say, somebody who makes those kinds of statements doesn't have the judgment, the temperament, the understanding to occupy the most powerful position in the world. Because a lot of people depend on the White House getting stuff right. And this is different than just having policy disagreements. I recognize that they all profoundly disagree with myself or Hillary Clinton on tax policy or on certain elements of foreign policy. But there have been Republican presidents with whom I disagreed with, but I didn't have a doubt that they could function as president. I think I was right and Mitt Romney and John McCain were wrong on certain policy issues, but I never thought that they couldn't do the job. And had they won, I would have been disappointed, but I would have said to all Americans, this is our president, and I know they're going to abide by certain norms and rules and common sense. We'll observe basic decency, will have enough knowledge about economic policy and foreign policy and our constitutional traditions and rule of law that our government will work. And then we'll compete 4 years from now to try to win an election. But that's not the situation here. And that's not just my opinion. That is the opinion of many prominent Republicans. There has to come a point at which you say, enough.
So there you have some extremely harsh criticism of the Republican nominee, Mr. Trump. I'll tell you what, I have not heard a president ever speak of another candidate that way. And I'm sure most listening to this or watching this have never heard a president speak of another candidate that way. I figured maybe I'd have a couple days to cool off, but as of today, August 4th, he continued on. So I'd like to hear your opinion in the comments down below.
Given your comments this week about Donald Trump's volatility and lack of fitness to be president, are you concerned that he will be receiving security briefings about ISIS and other sensitive national security issues?
Okay. As far as Mr. Trump, we are going to go by the law, which is that, and both the tradition and the law, that if somebody's the nominee, the Republican nominee for president, they need to get a security briefing so that if they were to win, they are not starting from scratch in terms of being prepared for this office. And I'm not going to go into details of the nature of the security briefings that both candidates receive. What I will say is that they have been told these are classified briefings. And if they want to be president, they got to start acting like president. And that means being able to receive these briefings and not spread them around.
Are you worried about that?
Well, I think I've said enough on that.
Mr. President, repeatedly now, Donald Trump has said that this election will be rigged against him, challenging really the core foundation of our democratic system. Can you promise the American people that this election will be conducted in a fair way? And are you worried that comments like his could erode the public's faith in the outcome of the election? And if he does win, given that you've just declared him unfit, what will you say to the American people?
Well, at the end of the day, it's the American people's decision. I have one vote. I have the same vote you do. I have the same vote that all the voters who are eligible all across the country have.
It's a little disheartening to hear the President of the United States make that kind of commentary, because I think we all know the President of the United States carries a little bit of clout when he says something. So when he says he has one vote, sure, he has one vote just like everybody else. But his statements do carry a little more weight, and it looks to me like he's interjecting just a little bit too much into this general election. That's my opinion, and feel free to submit your opinion in the comments. I'd be willing to hear them, actually. I want to hear what everybody else has to say about this. So let's go on.
I've offered my opinion, but ultimately it's the American people's decision to make collectively. And if somebody wins the election and they are president, then my constitutional responsibility is to peacefully transfer power to that individual and do everything I can to help them succeed. It is... I don't even really know where to start on answering this question. Of course the elections will not be rigged. What does that mean? The federal government doesn't run the election process. States and cities and communities all across the country, they're the ones who set up the voting systems and the voting booths. And if Mr. Trump is suggesting that there is a conspiracy theory that is being propagated across the country, including in places like Texas, where typically it's not Democrats who are in charge of voting booths. That's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense, and I don't think anybody would take that seriously. Now, we do take seriously, as we always do, our responsibilities to monitor and preserve the integrity of the voting process. If we see signs that a voting machine or system is vulnerable to hacking, then we inform those local authorities who are running the elections that they need to be careful. If we see jurisdictions that are violating federal laws in terms of equal access and aren't providing ramps for disabled voters or are discriminating in some fashion or are otherwise violating civil rights laws, then the Justice Department will come in and take care of that. But this will be an election like every other election. And, you know, I think all of us at some points in our lives have played sports or maybe just played in a schoolyard or a sandbox, and sometimes folks, if they lose, they start complaining that they got cheated. But I've never heard of somebody complaining about being cheated before the game was over or before the scores even tallied. So my suggestion would be, you know, go out there and try to win the election. If Mr. Trump is up 10 or 15 points on election day and ends up losing, then, you know, maybe he can raise some questions. That doesn't seem to be the case at the moment.
You know, I also find it very interesting how he's conveniently forgetting how the DNC was just pretty much accused of voter fraud by the Bernie Sanders camp and the email hacks and the FBI investigation. So, you know, for him to play this off like this is just another election is really disappointing. And again, that's my opinion. So I'd like to hear your opinions as well.
What is your assessment today as you stand here about whether Donald Trump can be trusted with America's nuclear weapons?
You know, on your second question, and I'll sort of address this to any additional Trump questions. I would ask all of you to just make your own judgment. I've made this point already multiple times. Just listen to what Mr. Trump has to say and make your own judgment with respect to how confident you feel about his ability to manage things like our nuclear triad.
With respect, sir, it suggests that you're not confident.
Well, as I recall, I just answered a question about this a couple of days ago, and I thought I made myself pretty clear. And I don't want to just keep on repeating it or a variation on it. I obviously have a very strong opinion about the two candidates who are running here. One is very positive, and one is not so much. And I think that you will just hear any further questions that are directed to this subject. I think you'll hear pretty much variations on the same theme.